Welcome back, everyone. No matter where you are, no matter what time it may be, I hope y'all are doing well out there. Before we jump into these encounters, I just want to take a minute to thank you guys for being here, for listening, for continuing to support the channel and what I'm doing here. Now, the encounters in this upload hold a special place for me. These aren't people that run and hide. These are people who stood their ground. They have my utmost respect, and I cannot begin to describe to you how much bravery it would take for an individual to behave in this situation in this manner. Now, you'll have all kinds of people say, I would do this or I would do that. Until you're in that situation, you can't really say anything about it. It's very easy to sit behind a screen and say what you would do or what you wouldn't do. But when you come face to face with something like this, your body goes into a mode of terror that you don't understand. This isn't like facing a black bear or your old bully from high school. Anyway, in these encounters, fear doesn't win. Instincts do. You'll hear from men and women who found themselves face to face with something impossible and refused to back down. Whether it's a father protecting his children, a soldier trusting his training, or someone defending what mattered most, every one of them made a choice to fight, to stand, to survive. No more rambling, no more TED Talks. Lock in, and let's begin. Everyone grab a drink, lock your doors and windows, hit the lights, and let's get started. Hello, Reels. I figured I'd share something that happened to me about 15 years ago when I was still living in rural Arkansas. I've never put this down in writing before, but listening to your channel made me think maybe it's worth telling. This was around late summer, sometime between 2008 and 2009. I was living on a small piece of property outside of Waldron with my wife and kids. We had a couple of acres, mostly woods out back, and a little barn that I kept tools and feed in. My two boys, who were 8 and 10 at the time, used to play out there all the time after school. One evening I was inside when I heard my oldest yelling from the barn. Not in a we're just playing kind of way, but that panic yell that makes a father move without thinking. I grabbed the old 12 gauge I keep near the front door and ran outside. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Normally you'd hear all kinds of bugs, birds, something, but all I could hear was my feet hitting the ground. I saw my boys standing in the barn doorway. They were pale as sheets, pointing towards the trees. And the very instant I looked to where they were pointing, I saw it myself. It looked like a really large man, but the shape of it just wasn't normal. This thing was entirely too tall. Then it stepped out a little further, and from the barn light I caught its face. It looked like a wolf, but it was bipedal on two legs. The ears, the snout, the way it was hunched forward staring at us, I won't lie. My blood ran completely cold. But I had my kids behind me, and that changes everything. Fear takes a back seat when you know you're the only line of defense. I shouldered the shotgun and racked a shell so loud that it echoed off the barn. I didn't fire right away. I aimed low and squeezed one off into the dirt about 10 feet in front of it. The creature flinched and let out this growl that I can still hear in my head right now as I type this. It was a deep, unearthly growl. It's like it came out of a barrel, but it didn't come after us or charge. It actually stepped back. It kept its eyes locked on me the whole time. It was staring at that shotgun. It definitely knew what that could do. I kept screaming at it, telling it to get the hell on, pumping the shotgun again so it knew I was ready to put the next one right in its chest if I had to. After what felt like forever, it backed up into the woods and disappeared. My kids were terrified and crying, obviously, and my wife had to come outside by then. She was white as a ghost. I kept the shotgun in my hands the rest of the night, sitting by the window until the sun came up. We never saw or had any problems out of that thing ever again. But for years after that, my boys were always scared to go near that barn, especially if it was close to dark. Even now, grown men, they bring it up sometimes. They ask me what it was, and I can't give them a real answer. All I know is it wasn't a man and it wasn't a regular animal. I'm not a tough guy, Reels, but I'll tell you, that night I wasn't going to let fear freeze me up. If I had to fight that thing tooth and nail to keep my kids safe, I would have. And maybe it knew that, because it decided not to test me. And that was probably better for both of us. Thanks for giving me the chance to finally tell this encounter. James W. Reels. This email, if you share it on the channel, might ruffle some feathers or cause some disturbance. That is not my intention, please. Do not take this as some sort of attack on anyone. You've had a lot of stories about people that freeze up. They panic, and I get it, trust me. Not everyone reacts well when they're scared. I've seen that plenty myself. But I wanted to tell you about a time I saw something I can't explain still. And the only reason it didn't end worse is because I didn't let fear take over. This was in 2017. I had already retired from the Marine Corps a few years prior. I was stationed all over during my time in, but I'd moved back to North Carolina to get some quiet in my life. I bought a little fixer-upper house near Edneyville, up in the hills. Now this was a place that needed work, and it set back off the main road enough that you could actually hear yourself think out there. One evening, around early October, I decided to take my dog out for a walk down an old logging trail behind my place. I had a flashlight, a sidearm, and a decent head on my shoulders. It was around 8:30 at night. That time of year, the woods feel like they're closing in on you sooner than you expect. We were about a quarter mile down that trail when my dog stopped, out of nowhere. She was a shepherd. Good nerves, but her hackles went straight up and she started growling. Now this growl did not sound like her at all. That's what put me on edge right away. I clicked the flashlight in the direction, but it didn't catch much. Just trees, leaves, nothing out of the norm. Then I started hearing footsteps, like a soft shuffle. They were heavy but extremely cautious and careful. Whatever it was, didn't want to be heard. I've been around enough people trying to move quietly in the dark to recognize the difference between a deer and something thinking about its next step. I quickly drew my sidearm but kept it pointed low. My dog was starting to whine by then, and that bothered me more than anything. She wasn't the type that would get spooked. I took a step forward and said out loud, "Whoever's out there, you don't want to be sneaking around my property." My tone was calm. I wasn't yelling. I was just stern. There was a long silence after that, maybe 15 seconds. Then something answered, not with words, not even close, but the sound that started like a growl and rolled into a huff. It came from maybe, if at most, 15 to 20 yards away. I swear to you, it felt like it vibrated the actual air around me. I raised the flashlight higher, and that's when I caught the reflection. Two amber eyes, the size of golf balls, way higher off the ground than you would expect from an animal. The beam hit just enough to show a tall outline with huge shoulders and the shape of a head that looked like canine. The ears stood out against the light, and that's what caught my attention first. I froze for a few seconds, not from fear, but from calculation. I wasn't going to start shooting blindly. This could be someone in a costume for all I know. Especially not in the dark. You don't shoot unless you know what you're shooting at. Not knowing what I was looking at was enough of a deterrent. I kept my voice even and said, "That's close enough." It just stopped and stood there. My dog was pulling so hard on the leash I could barely hold her. I decided to take a slow step backward, not knowing what this is. I wasn't running, I wasn't turning, I was just backing off. I did it the same way you would when facing a wild animal that's sizing you up. My flashlight stayed on it the whole time. When I took my third or fourth step back, it finally moved. Not toward me, away. It turned and slipped between the trees like it weighed nothing. The brush barely moved, but I heard the ground crunch under its steps. That's how big and heavy it was. I stood there for another minute before I realized I was sweating through my shirt. My knees weren't shaking, but my dog was still trembling. We turned around and walked straight home. No running, no noise. I locked every door that night, not because I thought it was coming back, but because I finally understand that there are things out there that don't care about human rules. I would tell anyone about this who wanted to listen, but most people around here already think I'm half crazy for living alone up in the woods anyway. But whatever these things are, they have intelligence behind their eyes. It knew what I was, and it knew I wasn't going to be an easy target. I'm not claiming I scared it off because I'm brave or anything like that. I just didn't show weakness. Sometimes that's all it takes to survive. You keep your head, you stay calm, and you act like you belong in that moment. Anyway, that's my encounter. Use it if you want. If not, at least it's off of my shoulders at the moment. R.D., Henderson County, North Carolina. I'm not the kind of man who goes looking for trouble. I'm 44 now. Been with the same woman for 20 years. Most of my excitement comes from fishing on the weekends or watching storms roll in from the porch. Back in 2013, I found out that when push comes to shove, I can still hold my ground. This happened near a place called Copperus Hollow, out in southern Missouri. My girlfriend and I used to take evening drives down there, just gravel roads through farmland and timber. It was quiet, and you could actually see stars for once. One Friday night, we parked off one of those old roads to watch lightning in the distance. It was warm and humid. You could feel the storm in the air. The crickets were going steady, and everything was calm for a very long time. Then all at once the crickets stopped. It wasn't gradual either. It was like someone just flipped the off switch. I noticed it way before she did, and I said something like, "Listen, do you hear that?" She nodded, and then we both caught a whiff of something rank, like a wet animal that had been rolling in mud. I figured maybe a bear had wandered too close, so I turned the truck key to accessory to get the lights on. That's when I caught movement, a little bit in front of us. A shape stepped out of the ditch. I'll never forget the size of this thing. It wasn't a bear, I can tell you that much, and it definitely wasn't human. It was standing upright, but hunched like it was too tall to stand fully straight. The light hit its fur and it was dark gray and patchy in spots. It was more thick on the legs and around the shoulders and on the arms. On the rest of the body it was thin, and I could see dark gray skin underneath. The eyes reflected the headlights a bright yellow. I remember my girlfriend gasping, and I could feel her shaking beside me. Every part of me wanted to hit reverse and get out of there, but something else took over. Maybe pride, maybe stupidity. I don't know, but I wasn't about to let that thing come any closer to her. I opened my door, keeping one hand on the handle just in case, and grabbed the big mag light from the console. I swung the beam right on it and screamed, "You need to move on," as loud as I could. My voice cracked a little, but it came out strong enough. The thing didn't seem to be intimidated that much, and by the size of it, I can't really blame it. It could have easily overpowered me, no problem. It was studying me more than anything, like it was surprised I was standing there instead of running or hiding. It crouched lower, almost like it was debating whether it was going to test me or not. I foolishly took another step out, the light still blinding it. I smacked the side of the truck hard enough to echo down the road. I yelled at it again. I don't remember what I yelled. It probably wasn't nice. The sound carried, and for a few seconds we just stood there locked on each other staring. My girlfriend kept whispering, "Please get in the truck, please." But I just couldn't turn my back on it. Finally, it made this weird sound almost like a bull and turned her toward the ditch. It took 2 strides and was gone into the trees. I listened for footsteps, but I heard nothing. Just that awful smell was still hanging in the air. When I got back in the truck, I remember my hands were shaking, but I'm not sure if that was from fear or sheer adrenaline. I didn't let her see me shaking. I told her to roll her window up, and we left quick, but safely. We talked about it for weeks after, trying to explain it away. Maybe it was some kind of mutated coyote or something. But we both know what we saw. I've hunted my whole life. I've seen all kinds of animals up close. I've seen people in ghillie suits. This was something else. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to tell you I wasn't scared, because I was. But that night taught me something about instinct. You don't think, you just act. Fear doesn't disappear, but you can keep it in check long enough to protect the people who matter the most. Thanks for reading this. I don't care what people call it, dogman, werewolf, whatever. I just know I met something out there that could have easily torn us apart, and it walked away instead. Thanks, Reels. Clint S., Douglas County, Missouri. Hey, Reels. I don't know if you want to use this on the channel or not, but I'll tell it to you straight the way it happened. I've heard tons of stories on your uploads where people run for their lives, and I don't blame them. Fear makes you do things you can't explain, but sometimes you don't get that choice. Sometimes you stay because someone you love is still out there. someone you need to protect. This took place in the fall of 2015. My younger brother and I were cutting up some fallen oak trees behind my property in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. We'd been hauling wood most of the afternoon and stayed out a little longer than we should have. The sun had already dropped behind the ridge and we were just finishing our last load when everything went quiet. You spend enough time in the woods, you know what normal sounds like. This wasn't normal. There wasn't even any wind. No frogs or anything, it was just dead. My brother was maybe 30 yards ahead gassing up the saw when I heard that noise behind me, low and deep, kind of like a snarl mixed with a growl. I turned around thinking maybe a bear had crept up on us, but I didn't see anything. Not at first. It slowly stepped out. The shape was off. It had the body of a man and it was covered in fur and its arms were way too long. Had a head just like a wolf, but huge. The only light was what little was left from the sky, but I could see the eyes. Orange. Not glowing like a flashlight, just this natural brightness like a cat's. I yelled my brother's name, and when he turned and saw it, he locked up. The chainsaw just slipped out of his hand and hit the ground. That sound must have triggered it because the thing twitched forward, like it was about to come straight at him. I didn't even think. Did not hesitate for a second. I ran toward him, grabbed a chunk of firewood off the pile, and hurled it as hard as I could. It smacked the ground near its legs, and that noise seemed to break its focus for a split second. I started screaming and waving my arms like a fool trying to draw it off him. My brother finally snapped out of it, stumbled backward, and grabbed the saw. I could tell he was shaking and too nervous to start it. But at least he was moving. The creature crouched down like a sprinter getting ready to lunge. I thought right then we were about to die. I lifted a hatchet from my belt and screamed again, this time as loud as my lungs could handle. That did something. Maybe it realized we weren't just going to freeze up, or maybe it didn't want to fight. Either way, it straightened up and turned away from us, walking off towards a ravine. The walk was wrong. It was twitchy. It wasn't smooth at all. It was kind of spasming as it moved, but it was still balanced for something that big. It's very hard to explain, but it's something you'll never forget if you see it. When it finally disappeared into the woods, I realized my hands were bleeding from gripping the hatchet as tight as I was. And that's not a joke. My brother was shaking like a leaf, and I had to steady him before we could even move. We got in the truck and sat there for just a second, trying to breathe. He kept saying, "Why didn't you run?" And I just told him, "Because you didn't." Neither of us slept that night. I stayed in his old room with him. We both had shotguns, waiting to hear something come back. But thank God, it never did. We didn't talk about it again for a month or so, not until winter. He admitted later that if I hadn't run toward him, he probably would have just stood there until it got him. I'm not a brave man by nature, but that night I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking about my brother. So yeah, maybe people act scared in these stories, but sometimes fear can make you do the right thing too. It just depends on who's next to you when it all happens. Anonymous. Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Hey, Reels. Now, I've been meaning to do this for quite a while now. After hearing the upload you did a while back about the pets and how they know when danger's present, I figured now would be a good time for me to send in my own. Mine happened in 2019 in Monroe County, Tennessee, just outside of Tellico Plains. I live alone with my dog, a black lab named Ruford. Yeah, strange name, don't ask. I've had him since he was a pup.
He's about 85 pounds now, built like a tank, and he's the most loyal animal I've ever known. I don't have much family nearby, so it's usually just me and him. This was in November. I'd just gotten home from work a little after 6, and I let Ruford out to do his thing while I went inside to start dinner. Usually he's back at the door within a few minutes, but that evening he didn't come back. After 10 minutes, I got a little worried and grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside to call him. He wasn't anywhere in sight, but I could hear him barking way down toward the creek. There's a line of trees that runs behind my property, maybe 50 yards deep, and the creek cuts through that before opening up into a field. I walked in the direction, calling his name, and that's when I noticed it was really quiet, besides the barking. Now, it could have gone quiet because of his barking, who's to say? But he was barking like he was warning something to stay away. Then I heard him yelp, hard, like something had hurt him. I didn't even think, I just ran. I reached the edge of the trees, shining my light toward the creek. And there was a massive shape crouched down low to the ground right over my dog. The first thing I saw were the ears and the shoulders, then the rest of it. It looked just like a werewolf, but far too big. This thing stood weird. Its legs were bent the wrong way. It was standing kind of half up and half down. Ruford was trying to pull away, but something had him pinned. I screamed to the top of my lungs, "Get off of him!" And I charged forward with the flashlight in one hand and a metal rake that I'd grabbed off the porch without even realizing it. The creature jerked its head up and stared straight through me. Its eyes were this pale yellow color. They weren't glowing from the light, but alive somehow. Its snout was wet, and I could see breath coming out of it even through the air, and it wasn't that cold. I swung that rake with everything I had, hitting it right across the snout. It made this sound, half roar, half yelp, and reared up on its full height. I don't know how tall it really was, but that's when the fear kicked in when it towered over me. It was at least 8 feet, probably more. I screamed again, this time not completely out of fear, but pure anger and desperation. I started jabbing and swinging that rake like a lunatic, yelling at it to get away from my dog. Ruford finally scrambled free, and the instant he did, I kept swinging and yelling to keep that thing focused on me instead of him. It backed up a couple steps, but it looked more amused or surprised than anything. It was breathing heavy, like it was about to attack or run, I wasn't sure which. Then out of nowhere, it just turned and ran across the creek in 2 leaps. The splash it made sounded like a truck tire hitting water. I ran to my dog. He was limping, but alive. There was a few deep cuts, and he was pretty shaken up. I dragged him back toward the house, never taking my eyes off of that tree line. I locked every door and sat there with my .357 the rest of the night, waiting. It never came back. The next morning, I found a few weird tracks down by the creek. They were huge, longer than my whole hand and spaced far apart like a person's stride. The ground was pretty soft, so they didn't hold shape very well, but you could clearly see the claw marks as plain as day. Ruford healed up fine, but he's never gone near the trees again. Me neither, if I'm honest. I've always considered myself sort of a coward, and I'm just being honest. Sometimes fear doesn't always mean weakness, though. Sometimes it can light a fire in you that burns hotter than the thing you're facing. I can't sit here and honestly try to tell you I know what these things are. But I can tell you, this one picked the wrong dog and the wrong woman that night. Thanks for giving folks like me a place like this to talk about this stuff. It truly does help, and you are a godsend. Thank you, sir. Emily, Monroe County, Tennessee. Friends, legends, family. What you heard tonight were stories of strength. Let's make no mistake. This isn't the kind you find in muscle or weapons, but the kind that shows up when everything in you says to run, and you don't. We all have it. You just have to dig deep enough to find it. It's easy to imagine how we'd react in these moments. But when you're staring at something that shouldn't exist, and you still find a way to move, protect, or fight, that's something deeper. That's something that deserves respect. To the people who shared these encounters, thank you for reminding us what real courage looks like. And to those listening, remember, bravery doesn't always mean winning. Sometimes it just means not breaking under pressure. If you enjoyed this upload, please consider hitting the like button. And if you're not subscribed to the channel already, consider hitting the subscribe button as well. It's totally free and only takes a second of your time, and it would help the channel tremendously. Also, if you've had an encounter of your own and would like to share it here on the channel, just reach out to me. Send me an email. I would love to hear from you. My email address is linked in the description below this video. Again, I want to thank all of you for listening and for continuing to support the channel. It truly means more than I can say here. That's going to do it for this one, y'all. Everyone stay safe. Stay aware. And most importantly, always trust your instincts. Whether your instinct is to run away or to fight. You have them for a reason. Listen to them. They could save your life. Everyone take care of yourselves and your family. I love each and every one of you. Until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones. Keep your head on a swivel. And as always, good night.